The conversation surrounding the Nintendo Switch 2 has been divisive, to say at the very least. And it's been very interesting seeing a number of video game executives chime in. We saw Shuhei Yoshida, longtime PlayStation executive. He chimed in about the Switch 2 Direct. He said it was underwhelming until From Software showed up. His main criticism was just the fact that Nintendo was concentrating a lot of their announcements on remakes and ports rather than first-party new games. And there was only one or two of those, obviously with Donkey Kong and Mario Kart World. And Yoshida, though, in recent days has taken his disappointment with the Switch 2 up a notch, saying that it felt that Nintendo is losing its identity with the Switch 2 reveal. Specifically, he said, to me, it was a bit of a mixed message from Nintendo. In a sense, I think Nintendo is losing their identity. For me, they are always about creating some new experience, like designing hardware and games together to create something, an amazing new experience. But Switch 2, as we all anticipated, is just a better Switch, right? It's the larger screen, more powerful processor, higher resolution, 4K, 120 FPS. They even had a hardware person starting the stream like other platforms do, right? And because it's a better Switch, the core premise of the whole Switch 2 is we made things better, and that's something other companies have been doing all the time. Of course, it's a more powerful Switch, so it's great if your gaming was only on Nintendo hardware, and it's the first time for you to be able to play amazing games like Elden Ring for the first time. But for us, the core gamers who own multiple hardware and play games on PlayStation, Xbox, and other platforms, the games they showed off, especially from third parties, in theory, it's amazing to have all those all-stars of industry games on Nintendo hardware. However, what they showed was like, oh. And I think with the Nintendo Switch 2, it's going to be very interesting to see if it has the long-term success, because it does feel like it's following a similar route that the Wii did with the Wii U, and we saw how that blew up in Nintendo's face. Although this time around, it does feel like they're taking things a little bit back, because the Wii to the Wii U obviously did a couple of very different things, and it didn't work all that well. And also, third-party publishers are very much now working with Nintendo. They want to be on the platform. That hasn't always been the case. But with the Switch 2, they gave a lot of these developers more power, and we're seeing a number of games that kind of felt like there was no way they would ever be on this platform. They are going to be there, like Cyberpunk 2077, and I assume a number of massive releases in the future, like Grand Theft Auto 6. I'm sure eventually they will make it to this platform because of, the hardware advancements that have been made here. We also saw Mike Ybarra, a long-term executive at Xbox and Blizzard. He left in recent years. He criticized Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, saying, I hope so. It looks like a game from 2000, about it now running at 4K 60 FPS. Ybarra has been a little bit more notorious as of the last, I guess you could say, couple months with head-scratching remarks. He took aim at Marvel Rivals infamously just a couple of months ago with a bunch of inaccurate information. We did see Sean Layden, another former executive at Sony, talking about the hefty price hikes for the Switch 2. Specifically, he said, here you see, wow, that's kind of a hefty price hike from Switch 1 to Switch 2, and wow, $80 for a game, but it's the only place where you can play Mario. Then you get your wallet and you buy into it. In Donkey Kong and Zelda, that first-party exclusivity kind of mitigates the sticker shock, if you will, of these price hikes, because you want that content so bad. FOMO in a way. And that is, that's how Nintendo's business is. They have some of the most notorious, some of the most infamous family-friendly franchises, and that is the only place where you're going to get those games and that IP, and Nintendo knows that. That's why the prices don't come down. But still, right now, the criticism around that $80 price tag with Mario Kart World, and I'm sure many games to come in the future, is something that isn't going away. We've seen multiple commentary pieces like this. Mario Kart World looks fantastic, but still is not worth the price. And after the recent direct surrounding Mario Kart World, a lot of people are still saying this exact same thing. The game isn't selling itself for $80. And despite what Nintendo, Doug Bowser, and other executives have said about Mario Kart World, it's a fantastic game, blah, 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 it's not giving any reason why it should be at that price. And I think it really just comes down fundamentally to greed of this industry that Nintendo is starting, because we are going to see many other developers follow in their footsteps, and this is something that Nintendo has pretty much just said they don't care about. That they're just making these decisions with themselves in mind, and that's okay. But I do think we are going to see the effects from this industry, and how gamers, again, the money just isn't there, the economy isn't the greatest, and I do think you're going to see that impact with a number of franchises, especially if the prices, industry-wide continue to go upward. This is the reason why they feel so comfortable making Mario Kart World $80, $80, and it's because Mario Kart 8 Deluxe sold almost 70 million units, one of the most successful games of all time, and that's why they're seeing, like, paying another $10. A lot of families, I guess in their mind, they think they'll be okay with that. But again, the long-term damage that this industry is inflicting on families and gamers, especially because the Switch was all about affordability, that isn't the case anymore. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see, you know, if the Switch 2 can match up to the success of the Switch 1, and so far I'm extremely skeptical on that. But the bad news surrounding the Switch 2 has only continued. We saw The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, some news surrounding that. The Switch 2 edition won't be including the DLC. Mind you, this Switch 2 version will cost $70 US. Then you have to pay another $20 to play the DLC. And including taxes, you're probably going to have to pay almost $100 for a game that released 7 or 8 years ago. And I've already given my criticism in a previous video about how these advancements, these upgrades for the, you know, the Breath of the Wild now on the Switch 2, it just doesn't look like much, especially compared to what PlayStation and Xbox have both done with their remasters. I just don't think that the price is acceptable, but that is what Nintendo is all about. And we actually saw some insider accounts coming from former Nintendo employees saying that this isn't Ubisoft, says the company's mantra of respective value holds. So that is how they feel about the pricing, and that's why the prices don't go down. And again, when you have a monopoly almost on a lot of these family franchises, family IP, this is what Nintendo feels like they can get away with, and they have. And it does feel a little bit worse, especially with the prices only increasing now, and them trying to sell older games and, you know, still giving it that premium price tag. I honestly find that unacceptable, but obviously many Nintendo fans just don't really care. And again, that's how normalization happens. But there also has been outcry surrounding the actual price of the console being around $450 US, because of the fact that in other regions it's much more. Like, especially in Norway, I think it's almost $700 US comparatively. And why is the Nintendo Switch 2 so expensive in Norway? Market price, the store says, while the importer refuses to answer. And yeah, these are the price equivalents in some of these regions, and it's brutal. I mean, this is, I understand that $450, I don't think many people have an issue with that, you know, but again, other territories, I think that's a different conversation to be had. But there's also been, again, the main criticism really is about the game prices and how greedy Nintendo is being this time around. And again, former Nintendo PR managers did comment on this pricing backlash, and they even acknowledged how damaging that this could be. Nintendo PR managers Kit Ellis and Krista Yang, they said that it was a deliberate omission by Nintendo not to reveal the console pricing in its presentation, leading fans to scramble online to find out how much the games and console cost. I don't want to blow things out of proportion, but this does feel like a true crisis moment for Nintendo, and I agree, I really do. And that's why, again, we have seen Nintendo fans with comments like this controversy about Mario Kart World $80 price is completely asinine. Gamers have been paying $80 to $130 for valueless and overpriced premium and deluxe editions. Again, this is a generalization because most gamers aren't buying that type of stuff. Nintendo gives more content in their games than any other company in gaming, and that's again, that's subjective. That's not even true. Then we have other opinions like this one. Nintendo fans will defend anything. When you ask the Nintendo fanboys why the Mario Kart and Donkey Kong game costs $80, leave the multi-billion-dollar company alone, although Donkey Kong is $70. And again, that is the pricing variability that Doug Bowser has announced, in which some games will be $70, maybe even cheaper, some games will be $80, and I'm guessing the more premium experiences, the new benchmark is going to be that $80 price tag. But don't worry, though, because we do have some of these Reddit comments that are going viral, in which, yeah, my uncle works at Nintendo, so Nintendo's going to be having internal meetings tomorrow to discuss the Switch 2 price change. Nothing's happened. And again, I think this is just some hopium, and unfortunately nothing has come about, and I don't think Nintendo is backing down. I'm sure that they expected some backlash, maybe not this amount, but they had to have known some backlash was going to be coming, being the first AAA publisher to increase prices now to $80. But indeed, staying on the subject of pricing, there has been a lot of outcry in regards to this $9.99 tutorial. I mean, that's what it is. A Switch 2 tutorial, which has a lot of its content surrounding the buttons, there's quizzes, there's some little mini games. But in years past, Nintendo has been notorious for giving that stuff away for free. We've seen other publishers do similar things. Astrobot, notoriously for the PlayStation 5, was free, and it ended up being massive for PlayStation. And in the past, we saw how massive this was for Nintendo with the Wii, with Wii Sports. price. But unfortunately, it just doesn't seem like Nintendo cares. Again, it just really feels like they're doubling down on their greed. Obviously, there's been all kinds of conversation with the worldwide economy and tariffs and such, but all these prices were set in stone long before then. And based on some of the new price increases that we're about to get into, certain things are going up. They are increasing. But specifically with this tutorial, the $9.99 is not an exorbitant price. This is what a Nintendo exec defending the Switch 2 Welcome Tour price had to say. And his overall remarks was, in an interview with IGN, he said that $9.99 is not an exorbitant price in his eyes, and that's a pretty robust piece of software with a lot of great detail in there. He says about the Welcome Tour, for some people, I think there are people who are interested, particularly interested in the tech and the specs of the system and things like that. For them, I think it's going to be a great product, and that's who I guess it's made for. And for that reason, and just the amount of care and work that the team put into it, I guess his argument is that passion equals they have to charge for this. That's ridiculous. I think it was decided that, yeah, this feels like $9.99. It's not an exorbitant price. It feels like a good value for what you're getting out of the product. Now, an interesting response that we got in regards to the defense and everything that has been going on, the outrage surrounding this Welcome Tour, which is really just a paid tutorial, was that Reggie Fils-Aimé, I can never say that right, the former Nintendo president, weighed in on this with a couple of interesting tweets. The story of Wii Sports Pack-In. This is literally the day after all of these remarks, all this conversation started surrounding the Welcome Tour. And he linked to a couple of clips in which he had discussions back in the past, fights at Nintendo about getting the Wii Sports packed in for free. Why is that relevant now? Well, Doug Bowser is the current president at Nintendo, and obviously he didn't fight for this. He felt that, I guess, gamers deserve to be charged pretty much, and Bowser's doing what Bowser's known for. And it is interesting just to know that Doug Bowser comes from the Electronic Arts pipeline. He was a former EA executive, which kind of fits with the EA motto of pretty much selling anything and everything. But specifically, this is the interview that Reggie Fils-Aimé linked to, and he talks about his fights in the past, and I think it is extremely relevant to what's happening now.
Over whether or not to pack in Wii Sports with the Wii, and Miyamoto pushed back pretty hard against that, and it was like one of the biggest points of discussion, and kind of one of the bigger wins for you.
Yeah, it's an understatement to say that Mr. Miyamoto pushed back. During the development of the Wii and the Wii Sports software, again, the goal was, we wanted this system to be attractive not only to the most active players, but to new players, and to bring them into the video gaming experience.
Yeah, and the thing is, even PlayStation has realized that in recent years with the PlayStation 5. I've had so many different criticisms of how Sony has handled that, but they made a smart decision by, putting Astro Bot in the box for everybody to play. And for some reason, Nintendo just doesn't have that mindset, I guess, anymore. Or they don't understand the value. Or they're riding on their high horse and they just think Switch 2 is going to be an automatic win because the Switch has become such a behemoth. And I just think that's extremely ridiculous.
And we saw Wii Sports as the way to be able to do that, because each of these sports made great use of the Wii Remote. Each sport was known by a global population, right? People know what golf is, they know what bowling is, they know what baseball is.
Yeah.
And my recommendation was that we pack Wii Sports in with the hardware. And literally, when I first made this suggestion, Mr. Miyamoto said, Reggie, Nintendo does not give away software for free. You don't understand how hard our developers work to create compelling content like this.
And yeah, again, it seems like that mindset has only continued now here into this future, in which I guess nobody was there to give the counter argument that I guess Reggie did in the past. And it's the fact that it's beneficial to the console, the overall health of the console, and it's not like there isn't value that's being given to players. I guess they only think value comes from people actually, handing over cash, and again, another ridiculous part of this.
Now, fortunately, because my SNES came packed in with software, I knew that, in fact, the company has given away software in the past, but it was against a very strategic objective. And that was my commentary back to Mr. Miyamoto, that by including Wii Sports, we would immediately have value in the hardware as the consumer is opening it up and setting it up. But more importantly, we would have a touchstone piece of software that so many consumers would experience. They would talk about it. It's what led to Wii Sports being played in bars, being played on cruise ships, being played in...
Yeah, it was an absolute behemoth because it was in as many players' hands as possible. And that's the benefit you would get out of this welcome tour, because obviously it has quizzes and stuff I don't think most people are going to be interested in, but there are mini games, some stuff that families and everybody can play with from the get-go. And, hassling over for $10, it's so dumb in my opinion. It really is.
Retirement homes, it became... this universal experience. But he was not happy when I first made the suggestion, to the point where on a subsequent visit to Kyoto and the headquarters, the team showed me software that would become Wii Play. So a collection of mini games, and those themselves were fun as well, but they didn't have the connective tissue that Wii Sports had with all of the experiences. So then I proceeded to piss Mr. Miyamoto off again by suggesting that we bundle Wii Play with the Wii Remote. And he was not happy about that either. But, in the end, in the Americas and in Europe, Wii Sports was packed in with the Wii proposition. It was not in Japan, which created a bit of a test market. And, it was obvious that in the markets where Wii Sports was packed in, that Wii became much more of a phenomenon. Wii Sports itself became much more of a phenomenon. And we did pack the remote with Wii Play, and I think it became the fifth best-selling piece of software in the history of Wii. So
that's right.
A couple early wins for me, and luckily initiatives that worked in the marketplace.
Money talks, success talks, and that ultimately is something that I guess Nintendo has forgotten here. Again, I guess they just feel the need for that $10 that I think more players than not are just going to completely ignore in favor for the more premium experiences. I just think it's a big mistake on Nintendo's part, but it doesn't appear that they are backing down, at least right now. But yeah, Reggie Fils-Aimé, he'd linked to all of these specific clips on his Twitter account. Clearly, this is his response to what's happening by the current executives that are running Nintendo, and it's obvious that he disagrees with them. I do think it is worth mentioning that this is not the first time that Reggie has spoken out against this current Nintendo. It was actually just about 2 or so years ago in which Reggie went viral saying, "This isn't the Nintendo that I left," in reference to a story about Nintendo of America coming under fire for its alleged mistreatment of part-time and contract workers. So obviously Reggie and how Doug Bowser has been running this company, disagreements, they've been running deep for a while now, it appears. The chaos that has been surrounding the Switch 2 with its pricing has only continued. Fortunately, it does seem like the tariffs and all that stuff isn't going to impact the console going up or the games, at least right now. But we have heard some new prices that have been announced by Nintendo, and again, we have the confirmation for all the prices, a lot of them that we've already seen before. But the big one that a lot of people are paying attention to is the Joy-Con 2 pair. Yeah, it's going to be almost $100, so this is going to be an expensive console. If you want everything, it is going to be extremely expensive. That is what's become abundantly clear, and I do think that there's going to be a lot of families and a lot of people that are going to be turned off, and I do wonder, again, about long-term success. I just don't think it's going to be there immediately like how it was with the Switch 1. But yeah, like I said, Nintendo's response to those who cannot afford a Switch 2, Doug Bowser did a recent interview in which he just said, well, you got the Switch 1 there, go play that instead. And which, yes, obviously many gamers, a lot of people that have lived this and you've been around, the Xbox, and have heard similar remarks from Don Maderick, in which, people were talking about at that time with the Xbox One, some of the criticisms with the always online connectivity. Don Maderick was like, well, you got the Xbox 360, go play that. So the similarities between what Doug Bowser's been saying with the Switch 2 and what Don Maderick said about the Xbox One back in the day, very, very similar. We saw how that blew up in Xbox's face, and many think that this could end up blowing up in Nintendo's face with how they've handled all of this. But indeed, though, Nintendo has a lot of different issues with the Switch 2, not even just involving the pricing. We have the game chat screen sharing. Why it has a low frame rate has been explained. They confirmed it is. It's going to have choppy image because they don't want it to use as much from the, the actual hardware of the Switch 2. So what that means is that it's not going to look phenomenal, which I just find that as a hilarious admission, but I guess that's that's one of the things that I guess you have to do. But it is funny that this is one of those things, that C button, that ends up being a paywall, that you have to have the Nintendo subscription. And if you don't, it's just one of those things that it's just there pretty much. But and then another thing, this is one of those things that's unverified, but Switch 2 Edition Zelda games won't support cloud saves to back up your data. There's just a lot of different issues with the Switch 2 console right now. A lot of things that aren't clear, and I think a lot of that is because of the piss poor communication on Nintendo's part. And hopefully we do start getting a lot more clarity, but right now I can't say I'm extremely excited for the Switch 2. There's definitely some games I'm eager to play, but I don't think there's anything about this console that makes me want to run out like I did back, around 2015, 2016 for the Switch 1. Just very different environments now, especially with the economy also. But look, there are upsides with the Switch 2. This is one of the biggest ones. A game like Cyberpunk 2077 running on the Switch 2, and everybody's saying that it runs extremely well. That should make people extremely optimistic that there's going to be some great games coming to this console in the future, as well as, developers having more power at their hands to deliver experiences that they wouldn't have been able to with the Switch 1 hardware. That's at least one big positive that in the future could be a game changer. But right now, the Nintendo Switch 2, a lot of the conversation, it's extremely divisive. The pricing has been a massive turnoff, and I have extreme skepticism that this console is going to be as big as the Switch 1 because of that factor. But obviously now we have heard from one major former Nintendo executive with his disagreement with how the Switch 2, at least parts of it, is being handled, and I think that is extremely striking. Satoru Iwata, how he ran that company years ago, just very different than now under Doug Bowser, who it's quite clear that they definitely are caring more and more about profits. And Iwata notoriously years ago talked about how he was a gamer and had that mindset, also cared about his employees. Some of that obviously still is there with Nintendo, but not to the extent that it used to be, and I just find that extremely disappointing. But anyway, what do you make of all the conversation, everything that has been happening with the Switch 2 and the latest updates? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video, or if you found any informative value. Consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.